everybody, welcome to the History Made Awesome podcast. I'm Eric, and today we are joined by a special guest. I have my father here, who's going to tell us a little bit about his life and what he thinks about the world. So, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Hello, my name is Eric also, and we'll see where this takes us.
Yeah. So let's give a little bit of background on you, kind of where you came from and all that good stuff. Let's start from the beginning. So where were you born, what year, and a little bit like that. So how'd you came to the United States and all that good stuff. So.
All right, sure. I was born in 1968 in Nicaragua, a small town called San Luis in Managua, which is the capital of Nicaragua. Uh, Came up here, well, in the story actually is a little bit vague because I was real small. All I remember is meeting some people in Managua and my tia telling me that I was going to
Your aunt, just to give everyone.
my aunt, excuse me, that I was going to go on a trip from Managua to a city in Nicaragua as well, where I was supposed to meet my mom. Needless to say, that what was really happening was that I was going to be joining these people, and they were going to be taking me on a trek all the way from Nicaragua to Los Angeles here in the United States, um, probably somewhere between the age of 4 and 5. So after the first hour or so, I started asking the usual question the kids usually ask, which is, "Are we there yet?" And unknown to me, that question was going to be asked for the next 10 days because it took us about 10 days to reach Mexico. And from Mexico, of course, I was passed over to another gentleman that was a friend of the family, that he actually brought me into the States. And that's when I actually met my mom here. So that little trip that was supposed to be a couple hours turned out to be 10 days, and with total strangers, people I didn't know. But luckily, thank God, I made it here safely.
Did you know that you're going to the United States, or was it just kind of like I'm going on this trip?
I did not know. What I have been told was that my mom was going to meet me in, I believe it was Masaya, which is another city, probably about an hour and a half from Managua.
Hmm. And like, were you ever like afraid during that time, or just like just a young kid, just like you trust everyone around you, or just kind of like this is kind of sketchy in a sense? Did you ever get that sense, or was it kind of like pretty chill?
It was pretty sketchy. I mean, a couple of times we had some things on the road that were a little bit sketchy, and then I even got sick a couple of times, so wasn't quite sure if I was gonna make it, or frankly didn't know where I was trying to make it to.
Oh. So you come to the United States and you're in Los Angeles. Kind of like how was that? Was it this is what years? This is still the early 70s, late
Early
60s,
70s.
late 60s,
No, it would have been early 70s.
early 70s.
Hmm.
Now during that, well, we won't really get to that point till the 80s, but was it Los Angeles at that point still like a was this pretty tough? Let's just talk about the area that you kind of grew up in that
Hmm.
sense when you came to the United States, and how was that experience like?
When I first came, we moved into the South Central area. It's basically about 10 minutes south of downtown LA. It's right adjacent to the University of Southern California, USC. And the area was gang infested and high crime area. Basically, it was one of those type of neighborhoods that you either caught on quick or you just didn't survive.
And then how was kind of life adjusting? Because you came here as a young child, so you were not really had those Nicaraguan roots, right? Or were you kind of still trying to transition into become American in a sense?
Well, I was young enough that transitioning into the American culture and way of life and thinking was quite simple for me. The language uh, took me about a year to actually start learning it, so that was a little difficult. But the time when I came, um, the United States was the type of place that you had to uh, learn the language and conform to the the American way of thinking.
And how would you describe that? The American way of thinking. How would you? What would you? What would that be if you were to explain it? Do you think?
Well, first of all, there would be the patriotic national way of thinking that as Americans, there are certain things that we believe in and uphold. We believe in freedom. We also believe in democracy, and also the American thinking that we can do anything that we set out to do.
Mm. So you come to the United States. It's a pretty not the best place in the world, and I've seen it. It's definitely not. Doesn't look like that still. So kind of like how was your? I guess how was the trials? Growing up in the United States as an immigrant and trying to make it day to day. Like how would you describe that? I mean, it must have not been
Hmm.
easy at all. I would think.
Well, you always, as a kid, you heard that America was the place of milk and honey, that everything was great. Well, and just like any other place in the world, there's different levels of that American honey. I mean, you have areas that are very poor, high crime. You have places that are in the middle, and then you have very nice places that are, where the rich and famous live. For me, we were at the bottom, and it took some time to get used to not only the language, but also knowing that certain places in South Central you don't go into unless you know certain people. And then also you have to be careful because there's some crime around you and someone might want to rob you or beat you up for no reason. So, I mean, that was uh, in Nicaragua, we didn't have that because I was growing up in a ranch in the mountains and it was all family. So it's a little bit different. There, you were more concerned about getting eaten or falling down some cliff, not necessarily getting beat up just because you look differently or you were wearing the wrong colors.
Now, when you were in the United States, did you kind of feel that you're an American, or was that something you kind of gave up yourself, or when you're in that environment, did people look at you kind of like different, like that you were kind of not
It,
American or not?
it's funny because we think about being looked at funny and being treated differently by the American people or by people who have been here a long time. There's even a subclass of that, and that is that even among the Latin American people, you're looked at differently if you're from a certain country. If you're from Mexico, there's a lot more Mexicans in the area when I was growing up, so there was like a hierarchy. And then if you were from Nicaragua or Central America or even El Salvador, Nicaragua, you were like the lower, you were looked at a little bit differently. So even then, it's like you were almost, in a sense, you were being mistreated by your own people, which is the Latin American people, which Mexico and all the other Central American and other countries uh, that speak Spanish, you would think that you would have this camaraderie just because you speak the same language, but no, um, you had that part of it too. But for the most part, I mean, once I learned English, it I blend in just like everybody else. I do know that for myself, I made the choice that if I was going to be in this country, I was going to do everything I can to uh, get ahead and also learn the American way and try to live the American way.
So would you say that definitely, if you were to try to identify someone as American, you would probably think that definitely the language, that's probably the one of the biggest things.
Hmm.
Culturally, probably getting into American culture, like the music, probably that also helps as well.
Hmm.
Dressing a certain way. Would you say that those also kind of help you kind of blend, in, especially like the way you carried yourself?
Yes, definitely. The way you carry yourself, and also that self uh, identity of knowing that you need to become independent and that you should be able to take care of yourself and the people that you care about. So, getting educated, getting a good job, being able to afford the things that the simple things in life, putting a roof over your head, putting food on the table, and being able to clothe yourself. Those are things that are very important as a kid. We were taught work ethic. My mother is a very strong woman, and her work ethic is um, one of the highest that I know. My stepfather, which raised me, also worked hard. So that was something that was taught us. And not only to work hard, but also to be self sufficient. I mean, as uh, our people that are here in the foreign country, we should not be coming here to be expected to give anything for free. Whatever we have is because we earned it, and that's something that I think that through hard work and determination, you can always try to succeed. And for sure, no one else should be taking care of yourself. You should be taking care of yourself, and that's something we learned as kids.
What would you say to people who I've done a bunch of classes in this. I've done not research, but been involved in classes where we talk about this. But the fact that you have a lot of people who come here to the United States,
Hmm.
and of course you're lucky enough to have the papers and documents and things like that. And you have people who come to the United States, and of course they want to have all those things, or whatever. But you have like this system that kind of says, well, no, you can't be this or that because you don't have the right papers and all that stuff. And a lot of people find that that's the reason why a lot of people don't actually try to rise up and try to become a better person
Hmm.
because the system tells them that they can't. Was that what's your opinion to that? And did you ever experience that type of like downtrodden, like the overbearing look by the system by the way you care, the way like your nationality and your culture? I guess the first point just that I made, and then you maybe talk on the second point on that.
Well, being looked down because you didn't have the right papers, I mean, that's something that even, like I said, we were even a subclass just by the fact that we were from Central America and not Mexico. But also, you were looked at because you didn't have papers, and you were either called names or you were treated a certain way because you didn't have the papers. Now, we didn't start having the papers. That's something that once we got here, we had to go through the legal system and actually apply and pay for the attorneys and do all the work that was necessary to legalize ourselves. We became American citizens long after we arrived, so it did take some time and it took some effort. And I'm sure that my parents could have used that money other places, but they chose to make the best decisions for us for our future and actually go through the entire process to get legalized here in the United States. So um, once we did, I mean, it was, of course, I mean, it's just a piece of paper, but without, like many other places, it's sometimes, most of the time, you need that piece of paper to get you into the door.
Hmm.
So obviously, um, I'm sure there's people that have done well without it, but it makes a big difference. I mean, for me, if I wouldn't have that piece of paper, I wouldn't have been able to go into the military, for example, which was something that helped shape and form who I am now in many ways. So definitely, if you don't have that piece of paper, it's going to be very hard. But at the same time, you have to take the steps, which our parents, we were little, so our parents took those steps to make sure that they got that piece of paper for themselves and for us. And we actually had to leave the country to become legalized. We did not just put in an application and say, oh, okay, you're done. No, we had to submit all that paperwork, and then we had to drive from here to Nicaragua, which is like a 7 day trip, stay in Nicaragua for about another 5 to 10 days, and went through all the legal processes there and asked to come back into the country, and then we drove back. I remember on the way back, I got really sick in Mexico City and almost died. Had to be hospitalized for a day because I ate something that made me sick, and then we made it back. And then even my sister had to leave the country early. She had to fly back with my mom during that trip because she got sick. So we came back and into Tijuana at the border there, and went through immigration, and that's when we finalized our legalization, and we were entered back into the country legally.
So would you also say that definitely during that time it was a lot easier becoming a United States citizen compared to what it is now? I mean, the amount of time it takes to become a United States citizen, all the paperwork you have to go, all the wait time. I think that also kind of helps the situation out a lot more. Don't you think so?
I believe that there was a lot easier, um, but then if you have to look at it in context as far as um, the times. I mean, during that time, there was a program that we came under, and that was a little simpler. And the programs that they have now are a lot more convoluted, and they require a lot more money and time. But I still believe that in order to do the things right, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. It doesn't matter what time of or era you're in. It, you still have to take the time and actually put the money to do it. Now, we weren't doing very well either, and I'm sure the people who are here also are not doing very well now. So, um, in the end, it's still a choice, though. You make a choice to take the time and put that money aside to actually do the things that you have to do. It's no different than buying a home. If you want to buy a home or anything special or anything that's important or anything that's good, you still have to put the time, energy, and all your efforts to making that happen.
So would you say it's all about the prioritize what's important in your life? If you prioritize kind of like this is something that I think is important, something that
Hmm.
I want, then I should definitely put my time and effort into that. And if you do and prioritize enough, of course you're gonna have a lot higher opportunity to succeed. Is that what you're kind of saying right there?
And yes, that's what I'm saying. And in most cases, you will succeed. And there's always that off chance that everything you do, it doesn't happen. But in the end, you still have to put in the work. And regardless of whether you know, nothing's for certain, nothing's ever perfect. So either way, you put the work into it.
So you also mentioned at the same time, I guess I'm not sure if that was. I guess what was your reason for joining the military? You kind of mentioned that
Hmm.
earlier in the. So what was kind of your motivations to join the military? Was it kind of like the area you're involved in? You thought the military would kind of change you in a positive way, or was it something else in that regard?
Well, it had to do with the fact that I had this odd thinking when I was younger because I was pretty wild and rambunctious and got myself into all sorts of messes. And I felt that, um, well, first of all, I didn't think I was going to make it to 40. And second, I didn't think I was going to make it to 20 because of where I was growing up. I mean, everything that I was seeing and all the fights and different things that I got into. Um, I felt that, well, I'm not going to go to college. That was something that, as growing up, the big thing for us was, well, make sure you got to graduate high school and then get a good job. Well, you didn't really have the mentoring and the counseling and the uh, person to guide you and direct you in that how to go about doing that. Funny story is that, of course, I know who knows how many other people signed up for the Navy for this, but I mean, watching the movie Top Gun and thinking that you're gonna go off and become a pilot someday. Well, there's a lot of things that have to happen before that, and even if you have all those things, you still don't make it to that level.
It's like 1%,
It's
maybe
yeah, the
barely
one
one,
one
barely one
percent of
percent.
the 1% that make it to that,
Yeah.
and that's okay. So I didn't make it that way, but had a decent job, and I felt that I needed to do something else. When I met my wife, um, she had a couple of brother-in-laws that were in the Navy and that were doing pretty well. So I figured, why not? I mean, here's an opportunity. Um, it's not like they say it's not just a job; it's an adventure. And my mind has always been the type that I'm always trying to do something new and something challenging and looking towards adventure. So why not? And I went ahead and signed up. And one of the big things about me too is that once I do something, I don't believe in doing things halfway. Everything that I do it to the fullest 100%. And when I joined the military, of course, boot camp was a shock. Um, I didn't realize it was gonna be like that. So
Haven't you seen what's it called? What's that movie called?
no, they didn't have Full Metal Jacket then,
Oh, okay. Yeah, they did. What's his name? The guy who directed it.
huh?
Who was the guy who directed it?
I don't remember who
He
directed it.
directed Space Odyssey 2001.
Well, no, but I mean they didn't have that movie had not come out yet.
Are you sure?
I
The guy.
don't think Full Metal Jacket came out before Top Gun.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look this up, but yeah.
Okay,
Keep, keep going.
we'll have to
I'll
look
look it
that
up.
up. But either way, I mean, I knew it was going to be tough. I mean, my idea of preparing for boot camp was doing some running and staying in shape, which wasn't difficult for me because I used to be an amateur boxer before that. So I felt like I was in good shape. But it's just the mental part that I didn't realize what it was going to be. First of all, the lack of sleep and the amount of intensity of everything that they have you do was something that took some time. But
Wait for it. 1987.
1987,
Yeah.
Full Metal Jacket was out.
Yeah.
Okay, well I went.
You should have watched it
I should have
before.
watched it.
You should have.
I went in '89.
You went with the Top Gun
Yeah.
like cool experience. Oh my god, this is so awesome. But no,
Hmm.
it definitely did not go out that way.
Yeah, yeah. So, but either way, I mean, you adapt and overcome, and that's basically what they try to teach you, and that's what you end up doing. So the military was sort of my replacement for college because I wasn't, and even when I went in, my mom didn't want me to go in. So there's a lot of things that my mom didn't want me to do, but I always went ahead and did them anyways. Unfortunately, in some ways, and fortunately in others. This is one of those that was fortunate for me.
So what year was this? Was it 1989,
It was
1990?
89 when I went in.
Okay.
Yeah, I went in. Actually, my first week of boot camp was Thanksgiving.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I got to have had a lot of things to be thankful during that time.
Mhm.
And then I spent Christmas and New Year's in boot camp as well.
Mhm. And then when did you graduate?
I got out of boot camp. I want to say it was like in February, January, February
Mhm.
is when I got out, and I had not selected. I went to aviation, but I had not selected a job yet. So they sent me to apprenticeship, which is to do like maintenance or anything they had to do. They what they do in the aviation apprenticeship program is that they just expose you to all of them, and then you get to choose um, afterwards. Well, it's funny how they choose. They actually give you a job and send you out to the ship, and then there you have to bid and fight for that position. So it's not as easy as the recruiters say it is.
So when you got into the military, you know at that time, if we bring it back to history, historically wise, the Cold War is still going on. It's actually about to end because 1989 it ends. The wall falls, and so pretty much the Cold War is pretty much over. If not,
Hmm.
it's done. The Soviet Union's collapsed. So at that point in time, when you joined the military, the U.S. military, and the U.S. in general
Hmm.
was the most powerful country in the world. Did you ever think that you would ever have to go into combat or like have to be on deployed to a combat mission or anything like that, or it was just kind of like I'm just gonna just see where
Hmm.
this goes in a sense?
Yes, I always expected to end up in something simply because of the fact that just want to say that while I was either in boot camp or in apprenticeship, most likely boot camp, is when the Ortega thing happened.
Hmm.
So that was one thing that was all of a sudden we have action going on. And then there's every year you look, there's always something going on in some part of the world, and the U.S. is finding itself in the middle of those simply because somewhere somehow we received the responsibility to be in the world's police.
And yeah, so speaking of the world's
Hmm.
police, I believe it was 1991. Yes, that is when the Gulf War occurs. And you've been in the military for what, a year or so?
About a year, yes.
So when you're being deployed, what was your kind of opinion on that? Was you more excitement than anything else actually being deployed to an actual military conflict? Because I mean that's something that you guys train for, like to be ready
Hmm.
for those things. Of course you don't want. Of course you know there's dangers associated with it, but you know it's something that you guys kind of drill into you, like be ready
Right.
for that.
Well, because I was in the aviation, um, I figured that we would end up on a combat type of a ship. You have a lot of missions and jobs in the military. Some of them tend to be more combat oriented than others. You can end up on a supply ship where you're just going back and forth supplying ships, or you can end up in a ship that's actually going to be part of an offensive somewhere. So I ended up on an old, it's called the USS Tripoli OPH-10. It was one of those Hilo carriers. We carried helicopters or the Harriers on there. So had a choice to when I got out of my apprenticeship, I had a chose. Actually, I was able to choose whichever job I wanted. I was lucky enough to come out number one in my class, and as part of that, you were given the option to choose any job that you wanted. And I ended up choosing to go on the Tripoli simply because of the fact that it would leave me in the West Coast, and also I didn't have to change my
Your lifestyle in a sense.
well,
Anything?
my lifestyle, but also I didn't have to change my amount of years that I was going to do. When I went in, my thought was only to do 4 years, and then any other job that I could have chosen was going to have me do 6 years right off the bat, simply because they would send you to school for about 2 years. So if they're going to pay for that much time for you to go to school, the military is going to want something in return. So normally they wanted 4 years. So I ended up picking, I think it was aviation bosun's mate, which is we're the ones who land, who direct the planes on the flight deck and the helicopters. So with that job, I was able to basically just go from the apprenticeship right into, and then you learn on the job. So that only kept me to my 4 year, which was kind of weird. I ended up getting out and then going back and doing another uh, 12 years of reserve. So I don't know. In retrospect, staying in for another 2 years probably wasn't a problem. But when you're a young man, you think in very small increments of time. You don't really think in the big future.
Hmm.
So hopefully that you guys have learned how to think in the big future.
Yeah. So basically, you that's the reason why you kind of decided to join the Tripoli, and so you're being deployed. What was your kind of thoughts on it?
Yeah,
Like, did
yeah,
you?
so to completely finish answering the question, that we know have any idea if I was ever going to actually end up in some form of military action, that my life would be put in. Uh, just because of the fact that you're in the military,
Yeah.
you need to make that decision that you may have to give up your life. And if you're going into the military without making that decision,
Hmm.
do not go in.
Yeah.
So um, more deaths occur in peacetime during training that they do in actual combat or these police actions.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of people that get hurt or die in training evolutions
Yeah.
because of the fact that one thing in the military is that you have to train the way you're going to fight.
Hmm.
So I mean, there's been just on the Tripoli itself, they had guys get blown off the ship. They many years ago, I think it was during the Vietnam era, they actually had a guy get his uh, be dismembered by a helicopter that came over as he was coming up. He didn't see it and got taken out by the blades. I myself got blown against the wall by a Harrier and almost got cooked. So if I mean, if for those who don't know what they are, the Harriers are the vertical takeoff, and the way they land is basically just by pointing uh, their engines downward, and you can imagine those jet engines can put a lot of power and a lot of heat. And what was happening was is I was directing a helicopter, and then behind me, another uh, crew member was bringing in a Harrier, and then basically the Harrier was almost landing on top of me, just because of the way the ship moves in the air and everything. And then as it came down, the wind just from the engines just blew me against the wall, and I got stuck there until it landed. So I mean, there's always that possibility, but we knew. I know it was somewhat of a somber mood as we knew we were going uh, into a combat situation, but it didn't really hit until like our 12th day on the deployment. We had just left Hawaii, and it was imperative that we reach the Persian Gulf by a certain date because we were on task to actually be part of an offensive. So there were some typhoons and hurricanes in the area. Actually, from San Diego to Hawaii, we went right through a hurricane, and then when we left Hawaii, we ended up going. through a typhoon, and we were doing some training evolutions, and one of our helos was coming back, and the winds were so severe that it had to be waved off. And when it got waved off, it never came back. We lost five. We lost two of our pilots, and we lost total, I think, of six guys, and we only recovered one body. And then we looked for like 2 to 4 hours. We did full search, and by the fourth hour, we received the command that we are to move on. So that's when we knew that, okay, this is this is different. When you don't even have time to look for your own guys, you know that it's it's for real this time. And we those are our friends. You know, I knew those guys. Um, and one of the pilots was I was friends with because he was friends with my boss. So I used to talk to him. His name was Mr. Love. I mean, go figure. But yeah, nice guy. I mean, we did a burial at sea um, once we got to the Persian Gulf, but it was more ceremonial than anything else because we only had one body. But yeah, it was very, very somber on the ship after that. We arrived at the Persian Gulf on time to do our mission. Uh, so
That was. Oh yeah, just continue. Sorry.
so we ended up doing what's called mine sweeping operations.
So wait, before you, the
Hmm.
operation you're a part of, that was up. That was it Desert Storm or Desert Shield? I forget
It
which.
was both. We did Desert Storm, I believe, was the beginning.
Hmm.
I don't remember the order. I get them confused. But we did both because we were there for 8 months.
Hmm.
So we were basically we were part of the fake attack beach landing that we were
I think
gonna
that was
do.
Desert Shield.
That was Desert
I
Shield.
think so. And then Desert Storm was actually attack.
Okay.
I think so. I think so. I should know. I'm the military historian
Yeah,
here.
yeah, you should know that. I was there, but the
That's the thing. Like when they say like when you look at people who actually served in those events,
mm-hmm,
like your mind is so encapsulated in like the private view of yourself.
right.
You never actually get a chance to actually view the larger thing. You're just
No.
so ingrained in what you're doing right there, which makes
Mm-mm.
sense.
Yeah, we didn't. I don't remember
Yeah.
which one was which. I'm sure when I was there, we knew that we were doing one thing, but
Yeah.
um, for the we we didn't lose anybody while we were there. As far as for us, we did that false attack, and actually, I remember uh, vividly having the USS Missouri and the USS Wisconsin next to us. We were basically uh, they were in our battle group, and during that time, they were shooting their 16-inch guns, and it was just amazing to feel and hear them shoot that. And then the concussions, even though we were, I don't know, probably 600 yards away or so. I mean, you could just feel the concussion when they would shoot those things off. It was just crazy to see that amount of
And
firepower.
that kind of takes you back to time though, like World War II, pretty much. It's
Right.
like that's how they began their operations. And just for a little bit of context, I think it was Desert Shield. Basically, I think what you guys were doing basically in terms of a large operation, you guys were like pretending like you guys were going to launch a beach landing. And
Correct.
then of course you guys the main army came from Saudi Arabia over the sand bean, and
Hmm.
that happened. So what was your guys' mission while you guys were there? That's
Our mission, part of that operation, is we were going to launch our helos. We had, I think, MH-53s, those really big helicopters. They can carry, pretty much a couple of platoons in there. So that was going to be our mission, and then of course to support the rest of the amphibious mission. Then after that, what we ended up doing is doing the mine sweeping operations. And you think about World War II, or when actual full blown ship to ship battles happened. Um, During the time when I was in, I didn't believe that was possible. I didn't believe that that was going to ever happen because nowadays everything's you know uh, over the horizon. You don't really see the person you're fighting, and you don't have these big battleships going against each other. So to think that we were ever going to get hit or anything was ever going to happen to us, I didn't
It
ever
did.
believe that was going to happen. So
So that brings us to the next point. So your guys' job was to help with minesweep operations because I believe it was Saddam Hussein who actually mined the Persian Gulf.
right.
So you guys are helping. You guys are
Hmm.
supporting the minesweepers who are actually doing the job. And then, do you remember that night that it occurred? So you can kind of walk us through, like you alluded to it,
Hmm.
to what was gonna happen. So what basically happened during that night?
So basically, what we're doing is we had already mine swept this area, so it was supposed to be cleared. And normally, while we did our mine sweeping operations, we would have the smaller mine sweepers. We had a small fleet of them, and they had EOD and different SEAL guys on there that were going out
Did they,
finding the mines
did they have
and
dolphins?
no, they didn't have dolphins.
Ah, damn.
No dolphins on
They.
this one. So in this case, because the area was had already been swept, they were actually behind us and we were in front.
Mhm.
And um, I remember waking up to two large booms um, in the front of the ship and just jumping out of my bed and grabbing my boots. And I could just see in my mind all the water rushing in
Oh, jeez.
because that's just what you imagine, I
Oh,
guess.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, there was no water where I was
Okay.
at, but that's what I imagined.
Like Titanic.
Like Titanic, exactly.
Except worse.
Exactly. So, um, got my gear, and I was at that time I was working at, at the flight deck operations center with which is what 010 level, basically about 8 stories up. And I remember getting up there with and basically in my underwear and my boots in about probably 40 seconds.
Wow.
And then the emergency response team, which is comprised of many decks and many teams on the ship, they set condition zero, which is like I remember, may not be the correct term anymore because I been a long
It's
time, but
basically code red.
basically they sealed off the entire ship in 59 seconds,
Dang.
which during training I think the best we had done is like a minute and a half or 2 minutes is like the fastest we ever done it. So these guys really kicked ass that day when it mattered, and we didn't lose anybody. And even though we had a 30 by 20 foot hole in the front of our ship, um, we didn't we didn't go down. So we had a couple of guys get hurt. We had a guy on watch that was in the front. He got hurt. He was actually in a cage down on the side of the ship um, on watch, and he saw the explosion happen right in front of him.
Wow.
And then had a guy on the top of a helicopter that got thrown off. So we're dead in the water, and when we send divers into the water, come to find out we're in the middle of a full-blown minefield, and if we move in any direction, we're just gonna set everything off. So sure enough, the mines did their job. They let the ship go in, and then they didn't trigger till after the ship was in the middle of the minefield. And then we had another ship that was supposedly coming to help us, and then they got hit. And they were a smaller ship. It was actually a brand new Aegis class uh,
That's right.
destroyer, and it was on its maiden voyage basically. And their damage was so bad that it cracked the keel.
Wow.
That's how bad that ship got taken out. So we basically spent the entire day trying to get the ship buttoned up, and then also the minesweepers just started to and the divers just started to um, detonate bombs to clear away. So what they would do is they'll put charges on the mines and then explode them um, in a way that they would create a path for us to get out. So we didn't get out till I want to say probably the next day.
It
And
was it was even on the news, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I saw your video, so
Okay.
it was it was on the news.
Okay.
So yeah, so like I guess coming over back to that point where at this time the U.S. military really has no real enemies that can really hurt you guys
Hmm.
at sea. This is not World War II. You're not fighting against Japanese or
Yeah.
suicide bombers. So you did not feel like that type of thing was
That
gonna
could
happen.
ever happen. Yeah. I didn't never thought anybody could touch the ship.
I guess so. I guess well, last question: did they ever like how like you always think that nothing can ever happen at that moment,
Hmm.
and then it happens. I think you've had a bunch of those things in your life, but that really kind of like sealed the deal for you in that terms of like always being prepared for things
Yes.
to go wrong. That kind of
Yeah.
prepared you for
And
that.
always know what needs to be done during those times. So that's one of the things that I think not only myself but everybody else on the ship knew exactly what to do, how to do it.
And that's just all training, all right? Just training, training, training. Like it's gonna be for real because you never know when it's gonna be for real.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
And it's interesting too because even Saddam with his primitive weapons, I mean, when we were doing that exercise, we actually came under fire. They shot
Scud
missiles at us
missiles.
with their Scud missiles, and I remember because of where I was at, it's basically observation deck for the flight deck, and I remember the Sea Whizzes just going off,
Sea
and
whizzes are anti-missile, what's it called? They're anti-air, but they're used for anti like missiles or anything like
right,
that.
they're used to take them out. We used to have two in the front and two in the back.
Radar guided,
Yeah,
and yeah,
exactly. And I remember them going off, and then I remember hearing over the radio saying missile inbound, and you're thinking to yourself, holy crap, we're being attacked. And luckily enough, their missiles, their guidance systems weren't that good.
I don't think they even had guidance.
Yeah.
They just had like this is the place we're gonna shoot. Hopefully
Hmm.
we hit something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and most of them, for the most part, they missed us by
a
a
lot.
half a mile or something like that. So, but even so, I mean, one luck. It only takes one lucky shot, and you're done.
Hmm. So you basically from that point you had to limp back to port in Qatar, I believe, right?
We were towed back
Or you're towed back.
to not Qatar,
Bahrain, yeah.
Bahrain.
There we go. So you guys were towed back. I believe during that time, did you guys? So you guys have stayed in port for a long time. Is that the time you guys actually got a chance to go check out Saudi Arabia and all that stuff, or was that a different time?
That was while we were there because we were there for 30 days, I believe.
Hmm.
It took them 30 days to get the ship back in good working order.
And did you guys get a chance? Well, did you guys get a chance to go check out like the local scene or not during that time, or not really?
Yeah, we got to go check out Bahrain. Um, we also went into Oman and um, Saudi Arabia. We actually didn't go to Saudi Arabia during that time.
Hmm.
The time we went into Saudi Arabia, we actually docked in Saudi Arabia in one of their bases.
Okay. And then what you kind of make of that type of culture and like being in that area, and coming from where you came from? Did you see any similarities or differences or anything you can kind of tell us?
Well, in Bahrain, you could feel the tension that the people there didn't really care for you. You were American, and that was good enough for them not to like you.
Hmm.
In Saudi Arabia, it was uh, not as bad, I think. At least it didn't seem that way. In UAE, United Arab Emirates, it was so parts of it were so westernized that you actually felt like you were home.
Hmm.
Other than seeing the women fully covered, and even us, we had to dress a certain way. We were there doing Ramadan,
Oh yeah.
so we had to be careful. I mean, they had this thing called the religious police, so you can get yourself in trouble for doing certain things, and they of course, before you are allowed to go, they they give you all the information of what the do's and don'ts. And being good military men that we were, we listened very well, and I'm sure that a lot of us ended up doing things we weren't supposed to, but in the end we made it back.
What was your kind of take on the way they kind of did things and everything like that? Was it interesting, unique?
It was definitely unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely unique. To travel up into the mountains of Oman and to see a home that's built with rocks, and I don't mean like rocks like you would see in our front facade here, and that they're attached to your to the structure as a um, aesthetics. I'm talking no, your home is built with rocks. Someone took boulders and just put them on top of each other on the side of a mountain, and you're living in a half cave, half rock, and it's just you and your sheep, and that's it.
Hmm.
So you have that, and then you go to UAE, and you have beachfront resorts and malls, like if you're in the United States. So you have both extremes, just probably within a 50 mile area.
Yeah. I guess to that point when you have, it's kind of interesting how it kind of mirrors the United States in a sense how you have these two forms of poverty, but even more poverty in those areas because, you have like you just said, in the United States, and probably if you live out in the desert, but you don't really have people building rocks out of homes.
Hmm.
I mean, you have a home at least, you have a structure, but you don't have a freaking rock as a home.
Right. And I believe that the type of property, not property, the type of poverty is a little different too, because these people that are living in these mountains, they're living off the land. I don't think that compares to living in Detroit when you're in a ghetto and you are living in the worst conditions compared to everybody else. I mean, to the guy living up in the mountains, he looked at his neighbor, and the neighbor lives in the same rock house that he does. So, as to them, I'm not sure that's necessarily poverty. It's
Yeah.
just the way they lived for the past 2,000 years.
Um, so you kind of experienced the area and all that stuff. Would you do it again? Would you go to Saudi Arabia as a place to go check out and all this stuff, or would you maybe do it differently? Do you think?
I would go to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is nice, but
yeah.
the place that really left
The most
uh,
impression on you.
a good impression on me for me wanting to go back would be UAE. Um, Dubai is where we were, and I mean the Dubai you see now is not the Dubai that I seen. It seems like it's got even a more extravagant and more westernized.
What would you make? Because you spoke on the laws that you had to follow, especially the very religious laws you had to follow. Basically, you can't do certain things. If we can kind of turn over to more current events, I guess.
Hmm.
Speaking on that point, this has happened a couple of times, but you had uh, some Scottish dude. He was arrested, sentenced to 3 months in jail for touching a man's hip in a Dubai bar.
Hmm.
Um, I think you kind of alluded to that, how you had to observe certain certain aspects of their lifestyle. What would you kind of make of that? Do you kind of like see that as like a way, like maybe they've not advanced too much, or maybe that they just have something unique about them, and you probably just have to follow what they say?
Well, anytime you're in somebody else's home,
Yeah,
which that being in somebody else's country,
yeah,
I see it the same way.
yeah.
And that is that they have their beliefs, they have their laws, and if you do anything that's going to put you anywhere near violating them, you're going to receive the wrath of their treatment. So I believe that even for us, I mean, even us if we were young and crazy and
Hmm.
did all kinds of crazy things when we were there, we knew there were certain things we would not cross the line
Hmm.
in. And I mean, one good example is that kid that took that poster in Korea. I
Hmm.
mean, that's something you don't do. I mean, and that's just in Saudi Arabia. I mean, uh, Saudi Arabia or the Persian Gulf or anywhere in those countries where they have those strict laws and beliefs, there's you just know there's certain things you don't do. I mean, they say don't look at their women, don't look at their women. If they say wear long sleeves when you're out in town, wear long sleeves. Um, if you do anything other than that, you're gonna find yourself in a situation. I mean, and it's not just those countries. We were in Singapore. Singapore I mean, you threw a piece of gum on the floor and you're gonna get yourself either cited or arrested. I mean, they're very strict about keeping their city clean. And if you're gonna be in those countries, you need to follow the rules. And if not, get out the country. I'm the same way about here in the United States. If you're gonna be here in the United States, there's certain customs and certain beliefs and certain things that uh, we feel strongly about, and there's certain laws. And if you violate those laws, guess what? There's gonna be repercussions. So if you're gonna violate them, don't be surprised when you're asked to answer for your breaking the law.
Do you think that? I mean, of course, we have our own little quirks, and we can talk about those. But do you
Hmm.
even think those types of laws should be even placed where, women cannot? I mean, currently right now, women cannot drive for
Hmm.
such a long time, and just this year, I think it was in Saudi Arabia, they actually got a chance to drive,
Right.
or or going to the extremes where if you touch a man's up, and in the news story, um, he was in a bar drinking, and then
Hmm.
he was trying to move. He was trying to not drink, spill his beer on his guy, and he accidentally touched his hip. It was actually an Arab or a Muslim man's hip.
Yes.
Do you even think those types of laws should even be in place, or do you think that every country just kind of has their own little quirks, and maybe that's just the way the world works?
Well, you have human rights that should be uh, you should be able to earn and receive certain human rights. And being put in jail or uh, being wrongfully accused and not being able to go in front of a court and be able to plead your case and have a fair hearing. I mean, I feel those are human rights, and that should be something that should be afforded to you everywhere. Now, that's their country, and that's something for them to figure out
Hmm.
how they're going to do that. I think obviously that's how the United States gets involved and in trouble many many times because we're trying to have everybody have those same kind of rights. Now, if the women can drive now, awesome. That's the women can dress however they want. That would be awesome. I mean, that's a freedom that we would all like to have.
And it comes to that we kind of talked this like earlier in the week, but like the fact that we have these freedoms. But then again, I don't even know if they would consider them. I don't know. I've looked kind of into it. Some of them are kind of on the fence, and some are not on it.
Hmm.
But the fact that we can do those things is like it's an amazing place to be, especially in the United States where we have like these freedoms, and we can do a lot of these things, and it's kind of like it's hard to complain. And we can kind of go into like we talk a little about like women,
Hmm.
like especially like we talk about the women's right. I'm trying to think of the conversation we were having. You're having with Isaac
Hmm.
about how there's something you should not, or something like that you should really complain that United States we have a lot more rights than we do have a lot of countries. Of course, it's not perfect. I'm trying to get to the point that I'm trying to make, but uh, so you can say that well, there are things that we can still make better, though. Of course, right? You would say that, or do you think there's something really we should be complaining about?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about other countries and how the United States goes into other countries.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there's always room for improvement. I mean, we've as humans, we're not perfect, and the United States is filled with nothing but
Imperfection.
humans.
Yeah.
And so the United States has obviously done some things that haven't come out right. I mean, you have one of the easiest ones to identify is us getting involved in slavery. I mean, for us to have slaves, that's not good, and it's something that will forever uh, put a bad mark, on our history. And I also believe as humans is that what we're not perfect, and when we do something that's not right, then let's try to fix it.
Hmm.
And if we're repeating history and we go back to something like that, then yeah, we're not doing good. I mean, a lot of places we went into the United States in trying to do well has actually done worse.
Hmm.
I mean, I think Iraq is one of those that people will say that we had no business being in Iraq. We had no business going in there and taking Saddam out, you know? And look what happened. We took Saddam out, and then now you had this elongated war with insurgents, ISIS, and every other thing that went wrong in after we took him out. So it's not perfect. and all we can do is try to learn from like our mistakes and try to fix things. Here in the United States, we're not perfect in our own country. I mean, look at all the stuff that you're seeing with the police brutality, and look at all the things you're seeing um, when we went when we came out of the slavery, and then um, what Martin Luther King had to do to try to make things better for everyone, not just black people, because even us, Latinos, we had our own level of racism executed towards us. I mean, we
Especially
just
yourself, right? There was a one point you kind of talked about before where you were actually stopped by the police because of you were misidentified.
yeah, but I don't consider that being uh, uh, done because my color of my skin necessarily as racism. It's my car matched,
Oh, your
and I
car.
and my friend and I matched the description of the people who robbed the bank. And then once they pulled us over and pulled us out at gunpoint with the helicopter and SWAT and everybody else, and they put us on the ground. And as soon as the guy turned me over, the first thing the cop says, "Oh, these are not the guys. Sorry," and just let us go.
So you don't think that was
No,
racist at all?
I just being at the wrong place at the wrong time and looking exactly like who robbed the bank.
So do you think that those types of mistakes, I guess you can say that that was like a very small mistake, but
Hmm.
do you think that happens to a lot of other people because of their color of skin because they fit this description of that person, like they the wrong place, wrong
Yeah.
time, and then do you think it's like on purpose or do you think it's a lot of accidents occur?
I want to say that it's probably a combination of the two.
Yeah.
And um, because of where I grew up in Los Angeles, racism in LA, because there's so many, it's so diverse and there's so many kinds of people,
Hmm.
it's not as easy to identify when you're, or I guess it could be if you're if something's being done towards you and it's being done because someone's a racist,
Hmm.
it's kind of hard to tell, I think, or maybe I'm just blind to it. Um, because I remember even when I was in the Navy, we were down at Seal Beach doing a training evolution, and we went into this place with a friend of mine that was he was African American, and the clerk, they were civilians. The clerk called him an eraser head, and I had no clue what that was, and he would upset. He goes, man, he goes, that racist, whatever, whatever. And I was like, really? What do you say? And he told me what it was. I was like, oh, I didn't consider that to be a racist. But obviously, I'm not African American. I don't know what that means. But um, tell you how blind I am to it. I was actually in the vehicle once at work and working with this guy that was a previous Navy buddy of mine, and he's driving. I'll take that back. We weren't buddies, but we
Acquaintances.
were acquaintances. Yeah. Um, we were in our work truck, and this guy cut him off, and he starts calling him a goddamn spick, and I didn't know what a spick was. So then later on, I'm talking to another friend of mine, and I asked him, "Hey man," he goes, "What's a spick?" And he looked at me kind of funny. He was white. He looked at me funny, and he's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, what's a spick?" Well, so and so was calling somebody a spick. He goes, "Eric, are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know what it is." And he's like, "Dude, it's a racial, it's a racist term for you." I'm like, "Oh shoot, I didn't know that." So he was like, "So that goes to show that where I grew up, racism into that level, like we see, white against any other color. Hell, I think I was treated more racist by my own brown friends than I was from white people. Like I said earlier, if you're from Nicaragua and it seems like when you're a Latin American, the more of the Spanish you have in you, the more they're more condescending towards the more brown you are.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that happened, and later on, and luckily that guy ended up getting fired for something else.
Yeah.
so I didn't have to deal with him anymore. But it was just interesting how I have no clue that he was actually being racist or somebody else,
Do you
but
think
yet he was never racist towards
do
me.
you think it's because um there was so much of it around you, maybe it just kind of didn't come to you as it, or maybe if it happens to you less often, that it kind of becomes like, okay, now I can identify with that, or you know what I'm saying? You just kind of get blind because it just occurs to you over
Hmm.
and over again. Do you think that could have been the case, or
I
not?
I think that I just don't entertain it.
You just
I
kind of move
think it's
on.
one of those things that I just move on. Yeah, I realize that like that person has their own problems, and my life is great, and I'm not. You calling me a name is not gonna. It's not gonna deter me for what I'm gonna go do. If anything, you know what? I'm gonna be on top, and I'm gonna get there. And if you want to be racist, you want to treat people wrong, you want to do wrong to other people, hey, you know, it's gonna come back to you.
Hmm.
And I believe in karma, even though it's something that most people say it's false. But everyone that I felt has done wrong, I always feel like at the time you want to have that victim mentality
Yeah.
and feel like you're going to never do anything good because somebody else is doing something against you or calling you names.
Hmm.
I just move on. And eh, from looking back, everyone who I ever felt has done me wrong or has done certain things that have cheated to get ahead and everything else, their life has gone south. And I'm, thank God, knock on wood, we're still alive and well, healthy and happy.
Hmm. So yeah, I mean that's a really good point. Like just you just I mean it kind of I mean it kind of there's some points in people's lives where of
Hmm.
course they're confronted with that, and sadly it's kind of going wrong for them at sometimes. So I guess a little bit of luck in a sense for those things, and just kind of being in the right place at the right time, try to try to do things right, try to put yourself in the right way, and hopefully you don't get into those types of situations.
Yeah.
You kind of talk about this too, how like if a policeman tells, it's kind of going to like the Black Lives Matter all that stuff. If a policeman tells you to do this or that, then you should probably do that. You shouldn't try to defend your rights. Would you agree with that, and like how would you
I
state
would
that?
strongly agree with that. There's a right place and a right time for mostly everything. And in the middle of standing in the middle of a street, as you have about 15 police officers in a helicopter, and every gun is trained at you, that is not the time to for us to stand up and say, "Hey, you got the wrong guy. Why are you mistreating us?" I mean, yeah, I was upset that my clothes were all dirty and and then your mom was upset because we were an hour late to pick her up. But that's beside the story. But then once the cops realized that it wasn't us, hey, they they apologized. The guy seemed sincere. Hey man, I'm sorry. You fit exactly the description. And I'm thinking to myself, guns are down. They're all holstered. They're not pointing at me anymore, and I'm good. Plus, you know, living in the neighborhood, you have a lot of run-ins with the police. I mean, sometimes because you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, there was one time we were late to school, and we were passing um, the park, and we stopped to say hi to some guys that we knew. We were on our way to school, and we we stopped and said hi. And then like 5 seconds after we stopped and said hi, we had three police cars come up and basically just arrested all of us. These guys were drinking, they had drugs on them, and the cop told both Sean and I. Sean was my uh, friend. We consider him my brother since we were little, and he told both of us we had our football uniform jerseys on because we were gonna play a game that day, and he said, I gave you 5 seconds to walk away." He goes, "We seen you come up, and we're like, okay, well, wait for these guys to leave. If they don't leave, then we're taking them too." And sure enough, we were at the wrong place at the wrong time. He goes, "If you would have just said hi and kept on walking, you wouldn't be in the back of this car right now."
But do you think the reason why they put you in the back of the car is because of the way they kind of look at people and the way they kind
It
of
was
do things?
we got arrested for truancy, is what we got arrested for. because it was like 8:45 in the morning and school started at 8.
Oh,
And
okay. So part of you.
so we got arrested for truancy. The other guys got arrested for possession of drugs.
Arrested for truancy. Is that
For
even a thing?
that's a thing. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. And your abuelita did not pick us up from jail that night.
That's our grandmother. That's the
Yeah.
grandmother doesn't know.
hmm And then when we got back to school the next day, we were suspended from the football team for 2 weeks because we basically made the school look bad by being arrested in our uniform, in our jersey.
Yeah.
hmm So, and that's a lesson I learned. Guess what? Hey, you know what I did after that whenever I seen people at the park?
Just kept on walking.
Just kept on walking. You know?
So do you think a lot? Do you think a lot of this? I mean, of course you can't really speak for people, but you've kind of been in that type of situation though. When it comes to like people who like with Black Lives Matter, people who've kind of gone through those types of things, or even like lost their lives from it.
hmm
Do you think a lot of it falls on them for maybe not doing the right things, or do you think it's also a little bit of the
It's a
system?
combination of the two.
Yeah.
You know, it's a combination of you have an officer that's has a racist mind, or has had a lot of trouble with people that live in those neighborhoods and is on edge. And but just let's just say 100% the guy. Let's say you know the guy is a racist,
Yeah.
and the guy is looking to kill somebody.
Well,
That
they say a lot of police aren't actually racist; that they just have
no,
like, that their training is bad.
in our example. In
Yeah.
our
Okay. Okay.
example,
Okay.
what I'm saying is that this guy is a racist.
Okay.
You know, you have just recently you had an officer that had already received a complaint on him for uh, hurting someone, and then now all of a sudden he does it again. Okay, so as a person that is staring down a barrel of a gun or is being pulled over by an officer, my belief is that you follow the instructions, you move slowly, you keep your hands up, and you go through the entire process until it is done. Now, if he starts to beat you down while you're on the ground, there's not much I can do there but to try to protect myself. And I would protect myself in that situations by covering myself up and to try to keep my head and my other parts from getting hit. And then once it is over and you're in front of the judge, then that's when you bring in your attorneys and that's when you go on the
A
offensive.
lot of people would say that at that moment when you're
hmm
being beaten, that you would be submitting to that system who's putting you down, and they would say that sometimes that even when you got to the court,
hmm
you might not find the justice you want,
That is true.
and especially with the recent shootings that have
hmm
occurred, a lot of police officers who probably should have been fired or gone to jail have gone acquitted. I mean,
Right.
most in your example, I mean, that time you had the Rodney King is like the most perfect example of that,
Yeah.
where you had a lot of those guys get acquitted
Right.
because of the system.
Right. But guess what? Ronnie King lived.
But
In the end, do you want to live? Okay. Now, if you die in the middle of that encounter with the police officer, there's no chance for you to ever find justice. You're done. Your justice is over. Even if somebody finds these officers guilty 5 years from now, you're dead. It doesn't really matter. The survival is what matters. You survive first, then you fight for your rights. You fight for your rights. Uh, Rodney King's a perfect example. You know, okay, they had the riots, they had all this other stuff. Eventually, they found them guilty,
hmm
and um, justice was served, and Rodney King lived. I mean, he even got some money out of it, I think.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, you you weigh you balance things, you weigh your outcomes, and I think the first instinct is to survive. You survive first, and then you try to change the world. Um,
So I guess this is kind of like my thing. Um, like you have people who try to change the world in different ways, right? You have people who try to protest. Um, In my opinion, I think protest only works when you have like something like a Martin Luther King, where you have a central leader, something that's organized. Because that's one of the things that made Martin Luther King's movement so amazing was the fact that they had a leadership, they had a structure, they had a hierarchy, and they can affect change through that way. With a lot of protest movements that I see now, it's kind of like it's just like this one Facebook group, but then it's just like multiple different groups. Now, I think it does help bring a lot more. I think the protests we have now are a lot more wide-reaching.
Mm-hmm.
You're definitely seeing them a lot more, especially like you don't really see the Martin Luther King thing until in Alabama in Selma when you had all those protesters be hosed down and beaten
Mm-hmm.
by dogs, and that's when it really brought home that this was occurring. But you definitely see a lot more protest movements who can now grow up a lot quicker and with a lot more ferocity. But I think if you don't have like that leadership role, then the protest is not gonna be as efficient, as effective as they could be. That's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like if you want to really change the system, I feel you kind of have to kind of get like embedded within the system, kind of like a virus, and then kind of change it through that way. Kind of work, get yourself educated, understand how the system works, and then kind of bring your own views into how you think the world should work, and hopefully through that way, get involved in leadership roles, anything like that, or be like a figure who's gonna who's done things,
Mm-hmm.
and then be that figure who's gonna influence that person who's gonna affect change, who's gonna be that leader, who's gonna be that person to do those things. I feel like that's like the best way to change like the system that we were talking about right now is through that way. That's just my opinion on it. What would you say to that if you wanted to like change the system where we see a lot of these things?
I believe that the people who try to change things by simply just doing the protesting and you do bring attention to their problem. Uh, the only thing I don't see in those efforts is that you don't see a coordinated effort
Yeah.
on the solutions to those problems. What are truly the solutions to those problems? I mean, police brutality, for example. Um, if you're going to only want to um, arrest the cop, well, what's going to happen eventually is, and it's kind of happened in Chicago already, is that eventually you're going to get a situation where it's not going to be worthwhile to be a cop, and no one's going to want to do that job to be a cop. And
Well, right
who
now it's
who
hard to be. Right
who
now it's hard to be a cop.
who who's going to put? I mean, even the guy who gets brutally assaulted by a cop, there are situations where he needs a cop. There's always that situation where, I mean, let's say you get into an accident and now you're stuck in the middle of a freeway. You're going to need a highway patrolman to come to your aid, put his cop car there, and stop traffic so that way the ambulance can get to you. So that's another example where, okay, it's not one of those crimes where someone's being robbed and you need a cop to come in and help you. There are other situations that you need the help of the police. And if you make it so difficult to be a cop because one bad cop made a bad decision and did his job terribly wrong, you're going to attack all the other cops. I don't see that as a solution. One thing that Martin Luther King and his people did is that they had a legitimate problem
Well,
that
legitimate being.
would mean that it was widespread, it was authentic, there was nothing fake about
So
racism.
you don't think that the Black Lives Matter is a legitimate problem?
I believe that not all the circumstances are legitimate. I say some of them
Okay.
are legitimate and others aren't.
Okay.
Like for example, I mean that one where that one gal was sitting there recording,
Yeah.
and as a police, I mean the guy didn't seem to be doing anything that uh, he should have been shot for.
Yeah.
It was no, he wasn't coming at him. He wasn't. And now even that one, was that racism? I'm not sure if it was racism. That was just most likely a very poorly trained police officer.
And I think also on that note, I've watched a bunch of the Daily Show did a show on it, but
Mm-hmm.
they talked about how they were talking to some expert, but he had said the police aren't actually racist. I forget what the term that he used, but it's basically they let their like the perceptions of people and the
Mm-hmm.
way that cultures like presented those people,
Yeah.
and they let that take over their rationale brain and the training that they should have.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah. So there's not many police that are racist. They just have those little perceptions of people,
Yes.
and they let those perceptions take over their
Mm-hmm.
motor skills to then do those things.
Right.
But of course, there's always the one or two people.
Yeah, there's always that one. So back to our example of actually having a police officer that's a racist, that is 100% bona fide.
Yeah.
You know, this guy has had many situations where he's proven himself to be that way. So you protest, and now you bring all this negativity, and you put the cops in the worst light ever, and it's a broad brush of every police officer on that force.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now, there are situations where that police department does have a responsibility and has the burden of making sure that this police officer um, is either removed or is better trained, or they have that responsibility. So the broad brush in some cases, I agree, it's something that should be there. Now, I'm sure that there's a lot of police officers on the department that know this guy, want to get rid of this guy. Now you have the leadership that's not doing enough to get rid of this guy. So, okay, but they're still good cops.
Yeah.
And in the end, I think the solution needs to go along with the protesting, and the solution should be towards getting that leadership and getting that cop taken away from the from the department, you know. And also, like that one guy, the union's trying to get his job back. That one guy we just
This is
example I made where
The Facebook live shooting. That one.
no, not that one. This is the one that had already been reported for police brutality, and now he beat somebody else up, and it's on tape.
Okay. Well, I'll have to find the so I can put it
Yeah.
on the description.
But yeah, you have all those things where I think the solution needs to come along with the protest, and the solution should be directed at the problem. And back to the Martin Luther King, they were well coordinated in the sense that they have these problems, and the solution was to go through the government, the federal government first, and then start making changes to the laws, and then also putting it on TV and showing these people who they are. I mean, that's powerful video of seeing these guys just attack with the dogs and the horses and beating people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest change that you can make is the change of one person also. You have those little changes that you can affect on people, and it's like if you've seen something being done and you're in a place of power, you step in and you say, no, this is not acceptable. This is not something that should be allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why also in these police departments, if they have these police chiefs and these lieutenants and people who are in charge, and they have an officer that is being that way, then they shouldn't be letting them be that way.
Cool. And then last question, we'll kind of end it here. So you're still having a good life, still having a very fulfilled life, and you've had a lot of experiences in your life. What was the biggest motivation for you, kind of going through all these different things that you've gone through and are still going through at times, you'd say?
I think my motivation is always to be happy with what I have, and always trying to do something better and something more. It's funny because I no matter where I was or where I lived, I always remember being happy. And happy is not measured for me with what I have necessarily, but just as the big picture, overall, am I healthy? Do I have people in my life who I love and receive love back? Do I get the opportunities to do the things that I want to do? I mean, of course, those opportunities don't just fall in your lap. I mean, you have to work at them and try to achieve
Mhm.
So always working towards something. That's the thing that keeps me happy too. Um, I always say that the journey is the best part of it, not necessarily the end. I mean, of course, you want to have your projects come to fruition, your hard work come to fruition, and have your projects completed. Or whether it's something to do with your school, your work, your family. You know, like for me, raising my kids, making sure that I always provided for them and that they become good people. Not necessarily, I don't necessarily measure them their success and they what degree they're going to be in or what school they went to or what job they got, and that the primary goal is that they become good people, that they are able to uh, go into any place, blend in into any place, uh, be able to do the things that they need to do, that they learn to be hard workers and have good work ethic, good morals. I mean, that's my measure of success for my family and for myself and for my kids. And I think if you do that, you're going to be happy. If you're content with who you are and you're confident with who you are and with what the things you're doing, you're going to be happy. If you're always trying to keep up with the other guy or be somebody else because that's who you think people want you to be, it's going to be tough. You're going to be happy. And the other thing is stay healthy. You know, be athletic. You know, do your training. I also
Get your
believe
squats in.
get your squats in. Yeah, exactly. You know, I also believe that as a human being, you should be able to defend yourself and protect the people around you. You know, so the same thing. You also want to be able to learn how to fight. You know, I mean, you have to be able to carry yourself no matter where you're at and no matter who you're around, and that all those things help you do that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's pretty much all I have.
Hmm.
Uh, so a lot of good stuff there. I think biggest thing is definitely be the person you want to be. You know, don't be stuck in like this place that you don't. You know, don't be stuck if you're down here or you're up on the high. You know, be where you want to be. If you're stuck down there, don't think that that's you're gonna stay forever. You know, definitely prioritize. Definitely do those things to get you to the next level, and hopefully to take care of who around you. And I think also to
Hmm.
kind of like, you know, leave the world better than where you left it. I think, you know, make an impact on the world. You know, I think everyone's kind of here for a reason. You know, you might not be the person who's going to affect the change. You might be the person who's going to influence that person to change things. I think that's some good lessons to learn by. I have nothing else. Dad, do you have anything else you want to add?
I think the only question that I didn't completely finish answering was how did the military shape and form my life? I think uh, the biggest things that it did for me is that it gave me the ability to think in ways that you will accomplish what you set out to do. Have perseverance. Um, I don't I don't believe in defeat. I'm one of those people that I'm gonna die trying, and if that's what it takes, so be it. So the military taught me that, and it gave me that can-do spirit, where it's like, okay, this is the mission. Now let's go do it. Of course, you don't just wake up tomorrow and go do the mission. You got to do everything.
Got a plan for it.
Got to plan for it. You got to put all the work to be able to have that uh, skill, intellect, tact to be able to get the mission done. But it gives you that mentality though, and that's something that in my life I remember that ever since I was a kid, I kind of had it in me, but the military helped me really
Brought it out.
cement that in there, and it cemented the fact that you I forget the saying, but it's something along the lines of you rise to the level of your training and not to the level of your hopes.
Hmm.
So what everything you do in preparation, I mean, the magic happens in the preparation. You don't just go out there and hope to get lucky. You put the work in, and that's in where the magic's at. And when you get to the real thing, 9 out of 10 times, guess what? You're going to be successful because you put all the work in before it. And then if you fail, guess what? Dust yourself up, get back up, and let's go at it again. Sometimes you try things 100 times and it still fails. Well, that might be life. I mean, I am religious. That could also be God letting you know that, this is not for you. There's something else that's more suited for you, better fitted for you.
Mm.
But either way, I'm gonna try like hell, and then once life beats me, in the back of the head a couple of times, and I crush into that wall, well, then okay, let's try something else. But simply because of lack of work, I don't think that's an excuse. Don't be lazy. Um,
Get after it.
like Jaco says, get after it.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Yeah. So, hope you guys enjoy the podcast. I think this will probably come out on a Friday because I think that's when we're doing these. Friday morning, definitely. But Dad, thank you for joining us on the podcast,
My pleasure.
and hopefully we'll might see you again maybe later. Hopefully, get you back on here. So thank you guys for joining us, and see you guys later. Bye.
I used to wonder what it